Live-action anime adaptations are usually a weeaboo's nightmare, but Netflix's live-action One Piece adaptation was actually surprisingly good. Good enough to where I deemed it worthy of a strength and power tier list. I recently made a tier list based off the manga and anime, but the power scaling of the live-action show is a bit different. The civilian tier is for characters on par with your average fodder pirate or marine. At the bottom of the list is Daddy's boy Helmeppo. He thought he was hot shit, but he got casually dominated by a Zoro that wasn't even trying. Kobe knocked him out with a single punch, so I put him higher. The low east blue tier is for characters above the standard fodder. Kabaji was one of Buggy's higher-ups and was skilled with throwing knives, and unicycle riding. Usopp is a skilled marksman that uses a slingshot as his primary weapon. He has a special exploding round he used to outsmart and defeat the fishman Chu. The mid-east blue tier is for characters strong enough to easily defeat groups of fodder or slightly challenge the characters in the upper tiers. Alvida likes to think of herself as the strongest pirate around, but she's closer to being the thickest. She's still pretty strong though, being able to destroy parts of her ship and send adult men flying with her club. Nami is a very skilled fighter, being able to take on groups of marines. She fought alongside Luffy and Zoro and didn't seem noticeably inferior to them. She could throw her stick hard enough to break glass that Buggy previously hurt his hand punching. She could be higher in this tier, but she didn't face off against anyone strong besides Kuro, who had her completely at his mercy. She did take out Sham, but that wasn't a surprise attack. Mr. Seven was a skilled enough swordsman to give Zoro a bit of a fight before getting butchered like the chicken head he is. Bucci and Sham working together gave Zoro a decent fight, but when fighting Zoro individually, they didn't fare much better than Mr. Seven. Sham impressed me a bit more than Bucci did, managing to take away Zoro's prized sword mid-fight. She also knocked him out from behind with a bottle. The high East Blue tier is for some of the strongest characters in the East Blue. Don Krieg was mostly cut out of the live-action series, but I believe his 17 million bounty being shown off just prior to him being easily dispatched by Mihawk was supposed to show how strong this new threat was, as the enemy the Straw Hats just had trouble with had a bounty of 16 million. So I believe Krieg should at least be in the same tier as said enemy. Chu was one of Arlong's top henchmen and had the ability to shoot out liquor like a machine gun, and like the other fishmen, has bulletproof skin. Krieg's main form of attack is bullets, so this is why I put Chu higher. Though Krieg can probably take Chu out if he lands his explosive cannon shot. Captain Morgan was able to take on Luffy and Zoro at once, and put up a decent fight. He caught Luffy's punch, and Zoro said not just his axe hand, but every part of him is a weapon. Kuro of the Thousand Plans has two-bladed gloves that allow him to slice and dice his enemies. He can move so fast he becomes a blur, making most people just sitting ducks waiting to be cut to ribbons. Nami was completely helpless against him, and he casually caught a surprise slingshot BB from Usopp. Even Luffy was initially helpless against his speed. He somehow tricked Captain Morgan into thinking he killed him, so I would suspect Kuro is actually above him. Buggy the Clown ate the Chop Chop fruit and has gained the ability to split apart his body. This makes him almost impossible to damage. Swords can't cut him and the pieces punched out of him just come right back. He can telekinetically control his body parts and turn them into weapons. He holds knives in his hands to increase his potency. The peak East Blue tier is for characters a level even higher than the ones below. Kurobi is a master of fishman karate and can kick hard enough to break a ship's keel. He easily defeated Buggy, solidifying him in the tier above. He got the better of Sanji in their first fight, and later fought against Sanji and Zoro at the same time. He also broke Zeph's peg leg and sent him flying with a punch, but he did take the old man off guard. Sanji's an expert martial artist that solely uses his feet. He was able to easily defeat groups of fishmen, and though he did seem weaker than Kurobi at first, he ended up defeating him with his finishing move, which puts him a spot above. Zoro is a man with the aspiration to become the world's greatest swordsman. Zoro usually fights with two swords, and with two swords you could actually argue he goes a tier below. He seemed pretty relative to Captain Morgan, he couldn't do anything to Buggy, though Buggy was a bad match for him, and he was also losing pretty soundly to Kurobi even with Sanji's help, though he was injured during that fight. However, Zoro is a master of three-sword style, and when using all three swords, he easily overpowered Captain Morgan and almost instantly defeated him. So I think at full power, Zoro definitely deserves to be in this tier, and he and Sanji are clearly presented to be rivals and should be around the same level. So basically, I think it probably goes Zoro with 2 swords and Sanji with his regular kicks probably go below Kurobe, maybe in the tier below. And then Zoro with 3 sword style and Sanji with his finishing moves go above Kurobe. The King of the East Blue tiers for the characters at the top of the food chain in the East Blue. The Sea Beast from Luffy's flashback is huge and bit off Shanks' arm. Unlike in the manga and anime, Shanks did not get his arm bitten off while saving Luffy at the last second in the water. In this version, Shanks was facing the beast while standing in a boat when he got his arm bit off. This makes it a much better feat for the Sea Beast, but also a much worse anti-feat for Shanks. In the live-action version, we never see Luffy defeat the beast, so we can't downscale it based on that. And I just don't think any of the characters below have the feats to take a creature of this size down. Arlong was the strongest pirate in the East Blue and had the highest bounty to match. He has the physical strength to flip small houses and bully Luffy. He's a threat on both land and sea, and with his giant sawtooth blade and physical strength, I could see him possibly taking down the Sea Beast. Luffy, the man with the dream to become king of the pirates, is a character who I believe had a lot of growth throughout the series. Initially, he seemed to be around the level of Captain Morgan, and honestly performed against him worse than Zoro did. He clearly couldn't beat Buggy on his own, and his punches didn't do anything to the clown, while Kurobe's did. Kuro's speed was too much for Luffy initially as well. This is all further evidence he would probably just be around Morgan's level at the time. But during the Kuro fight, Luffy adapted and was able to deal with Kuro's speed and overpower him. I believe after this fight with Kuro, Luffy moved up to the next tier. This is consistent with how Arlong bullied him in their first fight, indicating there should at least be a tier gap. During that fight, we saw Luffy start to slowly improve and begin to hurt Arlong with his punches, but then Arlong splashed seawater on Luffy, weakening him. Luffy's growth continued into their second round, with Luffy initially admitting his inferiority to Arlong and started destroying his base instead. But at the end of the fight, Luffy surpassed Arlong, smashing him back against a wall with his Gum Gum Gatling, and then finishing him off with his Gum Gum Battle Axe. The Gum Gum Battle Axe is the one move from the characters I already went over that arguably has enough damage to take out the Sea Beast based off the damage it did to Arlong Park. With the defeat of Arlong and his new bounty of 30 million, Luffy solidified himself as the king of the East Blue. But he's not the king of the pirates yet, and this final tier is for characters far beyond the level of anyone in the East Blue. These guys don't actually have anything to compare them to each other, so I just ordered them by how impressive their individual feats in the show were. It was heavily implied Shanks and Mihawk have dueled in the past. Mihawk seemed disinterested now that Shanks was missing an arm, but Shanks said he could still take him, implying with both arms he might have defeated Mihawk in the past. Shanks made the Sea Beast swim away just by staring at it, but it also took his arm, which like I mentioned, is a big anti-feat. Shanks' crew was also very skilled, clearly above your average fodder. Shout out to Yasopp for that sick-ass ricochet shot. Vice Admiral Garp can throw cannonballs like they're baseballs, and was able to easily beat up Luffy after he defeated Arlong, which comfortably puts him at least a tier above. He could have been Fleet Admiral, which is the highest rank in the Marines, but he just didn't want all of the restrictions to his freedom that came with it. Mihawk is the greatest swordsman in the world, and can chop large ships in half with the shockwave of his sword swings. They don't call him Hawkeyes for nothing, as he can cut down bullets mid-flight. He considered the mighty pirate hunter Zoro to be nothing more than a rabbit, and embarrassed him in combat using a blade no bigger than a letter opener. He was impressed by Zoro's resolve and used his large blade Yoru out of respect, but he defeated Zoro in one swing with it. That's the end of my live-action One Piece Strength and Power tier list. Season 2 has already been confirmed, so I'll be doing a tier list on that when it comes out. I will also be continuing on with my lists on the anime and manga, so subscribe and join the Weeaboo Pirates so you don't miss out on my future One Piece content. I'm gonna become king of the Weeaboos!